Welcome to the Criminal Imagination. This series is not a tale of logic and reason. It is a descent into shadows, secrets, and the crimes that refuse to die. We will uncover the forgotten roots of crime fiction, haunted mansions, unreliable confessions, spectral witnesses, and guilty minds, fractured by mirrors and blood. And through this, we will explore how fear, guilt, madness, and supernatural shape the genre we believed we understood. This is the archive of the repressed. Welcome to Gothic Evidence Dark Inheritance, a world where justice limps behind secrets, where madness wears a velvet coat, and the blood on the floor tells stories older than law or even time. Today, we talk about the psychological Gothic, Labyrinths of the Mind. Have you heard of this? You came back. I knew you would. Because once you enter these halls, where crimes are not committed in streets, but in the shadows of the mind, something follows you. A whisper, a flicker at the corner of your vision, a thought you were. Tonight, we descend not into haunted castles or bloody crypts, but into the most treacherous structure ever built, the human mind. The crimes of the human mind are those of guilt, solitude, delusion, and the unveiling of all reason. There is a peculiar terror in not knowing whether you are the hunter or the prey, in walking through a house at night and wondering if the footsteps behind you are your own. That is the madness that Dorothy B. Hughes conjures in her 1947 noir masterpiece, In a Lonely Place. On its surface, the novel seems like a post-war thriller, a pulp whodunit. But look closer. The corridors do not lead to justice, they lead to delusion. We enter the mind of Dick Steele, an ex-airman, a veteran, a drifter in Los Angeles, a man with violent desires and no clear history. Hughes doesn't just place us in his point of view, she entraps us there. The result is suffocating. The streets of Los Angeles are bright, sunlit, filled with police chatter and diners and gossip. But Dix walks through it all with a kind of floating detachment. He believes he is building a future, a writer's life, success, a beautiful woman. But the truth is dark. The horror here is that the narrator himself cannot be trusted, and not because he lies to us, but because he lies to himself. He thinks he is falling in love. He thinks he is clever enough to fool the cops. He thinks he deserves this new life. And all the while, women are dying. Guilt in the Gothic is never clean. It festers, it distorts, it rewrites. And Hughes knew this intimately. Unlike her hard-boiled contemporaries like Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, she wasn't interested in stylish detectives or brooding femme fatales. Her killers are not slick. They are not tragic geniuses. They are banal, broken, often ordinary. Dix is not a monster in the cloak of a man. He's a man, and that's what makes him monstrous. What Hughes achieves is radical. She inverts the detective genre entirely. The murderer is our protagonist. We live inside his head, and by the time we realize the extent of his crimes, it is already too late to escape. She writes, "There was something warm and gloating in him now, something that made him want to laugh. No twist, no grand reveal, just the slow, inexorable slide into the horror of the self." But if Hugh captures the American post-war psyche, lonely, restless, delusional, then halfway across the world, another writer was exploring a mind even more fragmented, even more unreliable. That person was Yumeno Kyūsaku. The name means master of dreams, and his 1929 novel Hell, or Kukushikan Satsujin Jiken, The Murder in the Black Death Mansion, is a kaleidoscope of psychological Gothic unlike anything else in crime fiction. The novel is set in a decaying mansion filled with secret corridors, eerie relics, and locked diaries. The story appears at first to be a classic whodunit, but almost immediately, reality begins to bend. The narrator, if he can be called that, is writing the story from within an asylum. He insists he is innocent. He insists he is sane. He insists the events he is about to describe really happened. But every page fractures further under the weight of contradiction. What Kyūsaku offers is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a labyrinth, a looping, unending spiral where time warps, identities shift, and the difference between memory and imagination dissolves. He writes, "The more I tried to remember the night of the murder, the more the candlelight in my mind flickered. Shadows danced, but whose shadow it was, I could not tell. What is being investigated in hell is not the crime, but the mind of the suspect. And not to prove guilt or innocence, but to question the very categories themselves." This is the essence of the psychological Gothic. It is not a genre of detection, it is a genre of disorientation. Let us speak now of motifs, not because they are decorative, but because they are the architecture of the Gothic psyche. Delusion. In both Hughes and Kyūsaku, we are forced to ask, what if our desires are not windows to our soul, but prisons? What if the stories we tell ourselves are more dangerous than any outside force? Dix is deluded about his power, his charm, his morality. The narrator of Hell is deluded about time, identity, even his own memories. And in both, delusion is not an escape, it is a sentence. Let's talk about guilt. But guilt. Guilt never leaves a room quietly. Guilt in the psychological Gothic is not always for crimes committed. Sometimes it is inherited. Sometimes. Let me tell you that again. Guilt in the psychological Gothic is not for crimes committed. Sometimes it is inherited and sometimes it is imagined. But it always corrodes. It distorts perception. It makes mirrors lie. The Gothic mind is rarely punished by law. It is punished by echoes in its own skull. Then we come to solitude. In the detective story, solitude is often noble. Sherlock Holmes in his study, Poirot in his armchair. But in the Gothic, solitude is a curse. Dix is alone not by fate but by choice. He cannot maintain human connection without destruction. The protagonist of hell is alone in the world in the worst way, unable to tell if he is the only one alive or he himself is already dead. Their minds become mansions and every room locks from the inside. Then we have imagination as prison. This is perhaps the most terrifying idea in these texts, that the thing which makes us human, which is imagination, is also what traps us. Dix imagines a future with love, respectability, normalcy. Kyūsaku's narrator imagines a sequence of events so convoluted, so overlaid with meaning and symbolism that we begin to wonder. Perhaps the mind is not a tool to understand the world, but a labyrinth to be escaped from. These texts are not just psychological thrillers, they are studies in the failure of rationality. And this is what sets the psychological Gothic apart. In a traditional mystery, the mind is a lantern casting light upon dark corners. But here, the mind is the dark corner. The crime is not solved, the detective is unreliable, the clues are hallucinations. And the truth, if it exists, lies beneath a shroud of metaphor. But why does this matter? Why do these fractured, haunted narratives deserve our time, especially in an age where every story demands clarity, resolution, logic? Because crime fiction is not just about who killed whom, it is about what society fears. And in these stories, society fears the self. It fears what happens when men return from war with dreams they cannot voice. It fears what happens when memory becomes performance and justice becomes a stage. It fears the descent not into madness but into self-made madness. In a world increasingly obsessed with self-help, mental health and cognitive clarity, the psychological Gothic whispers a deeper truth. That the mind is not a clean mirror. It is a cracked lens. And sometimes it lies. Let me offer you one more line from In a Lonely Place. He didn't want to think, he was tired of thinking. He only wanted to kill, to destroy, to put an end to the haunting emptiness. This line is chilling, not because of what he does, but because of how normal it feels to him. And this is the final point I want you to consider. In Gothic crime fiction, the criminal is not necessarily evil. He is ordinary. And that is the true horror. That the line between sanity and delusion, between imagination and guilt, between man and murderer, is not a line at all. It's a door. And in these books, it is always slightly ajar. So I ask you, in your own mind, in your own solitary hours, do you trust every voice you hear? Do you believe your memories belong to you? Or are you like them, wandering a labyrinth searching for an exit that was never built? We will wait for your answers. Until next time, when the mirror cracks again and the crime you fear looks back at you with your own eyes. This has been the Criminal Imagination.